I am not a resident as a affordable housing provider, so I work for Habitat for Humanity.
Oh, okay.
Love you both.
So we're recording, John? And then when it's public comment, I'll start the timer.
Evening, my name is John Voberillo. I'm the Senior Planner with the Community Development Department, and I'll be taking notes for this subcommittee meeting for the Affordable Housing Task Force. This is the Fund Subcommittee, October 2nd, 2024, and the participants on this discussion will be Corey Whitaker with Habitat for Humanity and Sophia King, an Inglewood resident. And at this point, we will also have prior to the discussion, we will have a public comment phase. And so I believe we have 3 minutes per participant in that section of the meeting. And I would turn it over to Nancy to begin the public comment period.
So Ms. Bailey, if you'd like to state your name, and I guess they ask for cross streets or address, and then I'll start your time.
I'm Kathleen Bailey, Jason and Union.
Okay, go.
Tonight as a resident, I wanted to express what I liked and what I did not like that caused me great concern, and one recommendation. What I liked, it encourages me, are the least intrusive solutions to providing real affordable housing. Those that suggested dedicating city-owned property to affordable housing and handing it over to well-known, dedicated affordable housing developers like Habitat for Humanity or Innovative Housing Concepts. City-owned property is citizen-owned property, and the citizen should make that decision and about that dedication for this purpose. I also like the support for the city purchasing vacant or abandoned commercial properties or light industrial properties and dedicate those properties for affordable housing development through Habitat for Humanity or Innovative Housing Concepts. What I did not like and what I'm very alarmed about were the recommendations to remove existing regulations and the push for intrusive region to existing developed neighborhoods with high density developed by for-profit developers in the name of affordable housing, such as the continued push for increased zoning density allowances, eliminating parking minimums, zoning changes like cottage homes and dividing corner lots, streamlining ADU approvals by template plans, mandatory inclusionary with fee in lieu, reduce permitting fees and streamlining development, fast tracking and streamlining ADU development, allow more subdivisions and 2-unit developments in all zones. ADUs have not resolved housing crisis in Denver, where the average rent for an ADU is $1,900, $1,900 a month. And the concentrated push for eliminating regulations relative to safety and durability is alarming. The existing safety regulations against single stair access came about when single access stairs caused major problems during fires, with both firefighters trying to fight the fires and residents trying to escape, and the number of tragic disasters brought about these existing regulations. And the existing building codes that are now set in place for condominiums were in direct response to the for-profit developers' rampant use of cheap, inadequate materials, which over time rendered those condominiums subject to deterioration that was too costly to upgrade and often deemed uninhabitable. Insurance providers will be unwilling to insure any condos built without the current regulations. My suggestion, keep the focus simple and achievable and already available land, targeting dedicated city-owned property to affordable housing and handing it over to well-known dedicated affordable housing developers like Habitat for Humanity or Innovative Housing, and or target the city to purchase vacant commercial or light industrial properties and dedicate those properties to affordable housing development through Habitat for Humanity or Innovative Housing.
Your time is up.
Oh, thank you.
John?
All right, moving on, I believe we were instructed in section 3, opening, to choose a facilitator. Is that correct, Nancy?
Yes, so on Thursday evening, each subgroup will be presenting their draft recommendations, and one of the facilitators just asked that one of you could split it up.
I'm going to be virtual on Thursday.
You will be, oh, I need to
Yeah.
get you a link then.
So,
Okay, it's going to be Sophie. All right, I need to get you a link then to the meeting.
Okay, section 4, discussion questions. The key question that we have is, what are the highest leverage items that will move the city closer to the strategic vision? And I'm guessing that is in the areas of funding. This is the fund subcommittee. So either one of you can begin to let us know what your thoughts on where do you think should be going based on all the things that you've learned. What are your recommendations that you think you want to put forth before the group on Thursday?
I think that we definitely have all agreed throughout, I feel like for the most part, that we need some sort of dedicated funding source for expanding, basically all the things that we want to add to our housing toolkit. And the things that we have most heavily discussed were definitely some sort of fee in lieu inclusionary zoning policy, and collecting fees from developers creating housing in lieu of providing affordable units, or giving them the option to provide the affordable units. That or some sort of linkage fee, which I think is kind of the same thing. Fee in lieu and linkage fee, somewhat the same. Obviously, we can buy for some portion of the general fund, but that's not dedicated as of now. And then another thing that I was looking into a lot are real estate transfer taxes. Specifically, maybe a progressive one, so like a higher value property is at a higher rate, like kind of known as a mansion tax. So I was thinking, maybe a lower, like 700,000 and under, or whatever. It's half a cent or half a percent, half of 0.005. And then once you go over a certain amount, it's like 2, something like that. So those are kind of the big, and I mean, we have a housing rehabilitation fund line item in the Inglewood City budget as of now. I think that might be the Fund 46. It's used for people to fix their properties and stuff. So like there's kind of a bucket for it to go into, but in some existing funds, I think it's like $1 million, but we need to expand that. So those are the two kind of things that I see as viable sources.
I think you're right on the dedicated funding source. There needs to be some source of funding so that when people are looking at a project, there can be some predictability as to what Inglewood can bring to the table. I think that's really, so from a developer standpoint, when you're looking at a project, you want to know, hey, I'm going to go get these federal grants, these state grants, but what is Inglewood bringing to the table? What can I get from them? And having some better predictability on that will attract more developers because they know they can get a certain amount of funding to make the project work. It also shows that commitment that they are, the city as a whole is committed to affordable housing. I think where I've been, I guess, noodling around in my head is which one of these is going to bring in the most amount of funding, or where should we target it? Should we target, like, so the linkage fee be targeted towards development? So as new development's happening, we're bringing in funds from that. Well, if we have a slowdown and new development slows down, not necessarily bringing in funds. So that's not the most predictable source of funds. General funds, I think without some codified, like you have to spend this much amount of your general funds, those are discretionary funds. And so those can be used however they want. So there's not predictability in that. I like the real estate transfer fees because, real estate transfers can slow down as well, just like building can. But I think it's saying, hey, there's this thing happening in the city and we want to, and it's not necessarily benefiting certain people, and we want to be able to take some of that revenue to benefit certain people. I'd love to know what that magnitude of something like that could be in terms of funding. Sorry, I can't connect to the internet, which means I can't pull up the notes that I had. There's another one though.
Are you having trouble connecting to the internet? Is that what
I
you're
am, I don't know. It says
I've been told if you forget the network and then go back in, it should be the Inglewood Public.
did that once, but I'll try it again.
Okay. That's the best I've got, I'm sorry.
My degree is in economics, I like hearing the data.
Yeah, what else was on the?
So, yeah,
Oh, the other, Denver is doing a dedicated sales tax. And Adams County, I don't know if it's a sales tax or I forget what exactly it is, but they're doing something as well for that county that would create funds to go. So trying to think about where that funding is coming from. Interesting. Denver does some amount of mills on their property taxes. So they have some property tax that go. Now that's impacting Inglewood residents, but it's also the more you assess value, the more you're paying towards affordable housing, similar to your real estate taxes. So I think there's that. I think the other thing with the funding sources that I was trying to think through is how would we want those allocated in terms of if we are able to create funding, where are the priorities, or how do we decide where that goes to? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess I do, like there are just so many different tacks we could take, but I also guess that's kind of what the other subcommittees, like we have a weigh in on those as well, but I don't know that as through funding I guess we could be like, okay, well, we have this source and it's intended for, homelessness outreach and temporary rent assistance and all of these things, and we have another funding source and its intent is, another angle. So I guess it could definitely be in our purview, but I didn't.
You're right, it does.
I didn't walk through.
It does seem
what
it's
happens.
more the committee as a whole.
Yeah,
Or,
I
or
think
some
so.
next level after the committee of saying, here's our housing priorities, this is how we're going to allocate this funding. This is how we want to allocate this funding this year. But it does seem like there needs to be some guidance on how that funding is allocated.
Yeah. Well, and that we definitely discussed having a permanent committee, like establishing a housing committee, that would probably help guide and recommend that, which I think is a good idea if we do get a dedicated funding source, so that there's a continual oversight and guidance for it.
Is there one of these that you feel like is especially stronger than the other.
I agree with you that I think the transfer taxes would be a probably more consistent source. And with, just kind of, I don't know, we're pretty well built out, so new development is a limited process. Like, it's not just happening everywhere all the time. That being said, I kind of support both. The reason for my support of like a mandatory inclusionary policy, number one, is that it's kind of solidarity with both cities that border us, Littleton and Denver. There's consistency to it. It is already in operation, and by most accounts, are going to keep working with them. And it's a commitment in the long term, I guess, to as things do change, maybe it's kind of a long-term commitment that's built in. And for a third argument, to me, I'm like, the requirement could be very low, or the fee very low. Like, it could be not a terrifically impactful to an individual development, but still be helpful, in the context of affordable housing. So it's kind of a customizable policy that we could adopt. So, because I think Littleton's requirement is something like 5%, or so. It's pretty much on the low end, for affordable units. So,
Nancy, is there a policy subcommittee? I can't remember. Is it fund, land use?
I'm sorry.
What are the
It's
different?
assist, preserve, fund, and build. Those are the 4 areas. So the policy, John, correct me if I'm wrong, because the committees or the task force purpose is then to make recommendations to city council. I believe city council would be making the policy, correct?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through
Yeah.
so inclusionary is a funny one because they balance, like, it could be fund if somebody does it in lieu, or it could be that they're including it in their development, which might be under the bill. Like,
it would be built.
just trying to figure out where
Bill
it falls,
Bill
whether it's
slash
us.
No,
or
that's
not.
fine. And if I could just, because I've sat in on these, there's
There's
just
going to be
been,
overlap.
there's going to be overlap. I mean, assist and preserve was getting into funding, and so
Okay.
please don't let that hang you up.
I agree with you. There's a level of commitment that the city shows to say, hey, this is what we expect of your developments regardless. Littleton's shown it, Denver's shown it. I think wouldn't be a far reach for that. That is not necessarily going to create a ton of, it's including it in a, but how do you also, especially, there's not any for sale market rate development. Not going to get any for sale affordable at, and the product type is very specific. People are building studio 1, 2-bedroom homes. You're going to get a very specific product type from that probably for right now.
Yeah, I completely agree that it's like certainly not the solution, but I think that it can be done in a way that it's not, an enormous upheaval of how things are done, but does provide a small amount of funding to the projects that we want to, the priorities that we want for affordable housing, or certainly of affordable units. So
what are you more drawn towards? A requirement where they have to do it and there is no fee in lieu?
oh, no, I don't think
Or-
you can do that. I think they have to have the option.
I don't know if they have to. It's new development. If you can
Require on-site
require
affordable units.
on-site. You have to have somebody check that, but I feel like you can.
I think you're right, Corey. I think that is something that you can either, a lot of cities are making an option so that, you know, there's a little bit more choice, but you can, if you really want to, you could probably just say, you're just gonna do that no matter what. It's probably, I think it
Or I
is-
think when we talked to Longmont, they increased their fee in lieu to such a high,
To discourage
to discourage.
that option. Yeah, that, I mean, that would be an option.
So I think, but what you're saying, I think what you're saying with this is you want it to be a tool to provide affordable housing within new developments, not necessarily a funding tool. It could bring funding in, but ideally, it is.
I guess, yeah, and I guess to your question just before is like, we could definitely set it up where the fee is more attractive and we're collecting funds for our affordable housing priorities, or set it up where building the units is more attractive. And so that is a question. I don't know, honestly, what makes the most sense for.
Well, I think if we do the latter, what you said, where we're incentivizing them to build the units on site, then we want other funding sources
Yes.
to bring funding in for other types of development, because we know that's not going to produce diverse amount of product types that meet the needs of Inglewood residents. It's going to be most likely very specific product.
Right.
So it could be a mild funding source, but the intent is not necessarily that it's a funding source, it's that it's creating more affordable housing.
Got it.
So then, I think if that's the case, what we should try to do is craft kind of what does a funding portfolio look like that is diverse enough that might mitigate different market conditions, that's creating a more predictable pipeline of funds to the city. Because yeah, if we put all our eggs in the one basket, then, you know, if the market shifts, then that basket might run dry. And then the predictability of developers saying, hey, I'm going to do this project here, but actually we don't have as much money as we thought we were going to have this year because this happened. So if we can identify maybe like 3 or 4 funding sources, then I think, and like 3 or 4 diverse funding sources, I think that's probably the best way. So I think real estate transfer taxes are a great one. And I like your idea about kind of graduating levels of those. And I don't know the specifics of that, whether you do that that's limited to residential, if that's commercial, if that's.
I actually wrote that down. Apply to commercial and industrial land, question mark. I was like, I don't know. I guess we would want to kind of look at what other cities are doing. The state of Colorado's is not a real estate transfer tax. It's a documentary fee, but it's functionally the same thing, and it's just residential. And
So
theirs
it's a
is,
fee on recording.
yeah, it's like
So you have to
1
record
cent
that.
for every $100 in sale price. Which would be on, yeah, it's like on a $500,000 property, like.
So that one, again, I think the great thing is if there are real estate transfers happening, benefit, but if the market slows down and those slow down, that slows down. So when I try to think about like the most consistent source, unfortunately, but probably property tax, because year in and year out, that is going to be there regardless of the market. They're based on assessed values, but those don't often go down drastically. That is probably the most consistent funding source, is to put some additional mills on the city's property tax.
And when you say mill, what do you mean?
So the property tax is assessed based on mill levy. And so the county has certain mills, the schools have mills, and those all calculate up to, I'm assuming Englewood's like 80 mills or something, I don't know if you all know. And so those mills get, when you pay your property taxes, those get fed different entities. And so if you put a 1 mil on all the property taxes, that would then get calculated and get fed to Englewood. I don't know how it works because taxes are a county thing, and Englewood's a city, and I don't know how that all happens, but
County is fully in charge.
so, but that would be probably the most consistent way to get funding. So I don't know the feasibility of it, but it's probably consistent. Then there's sales tax, which is what Denver's doing. That can ebb and flow to some degree, but not super drastically.
Is Denver targeting any like specific items or classes of goods or anything, or is it
They
just?
are excluding certain things. I believe they're excluding grocery. Like there was another one that they're excluding. So yeah, they're saying sales tax except for these types of things like essential goods.
Feminine height thing. Sorry, I'll shut up.
It's okay. So, I mean, I don't know how, residents or voters or anybody would take that, but it's another option. And then I kind of wonder too, if there is some level of commitment, if we create kind of this diverse package of funding, then there's kind of this backdrop of the general fund, and if one thing dips below a certain amount, maybe a commitment that the general fund step in to support.
And I feel like we could do, I mean, this suggested just as a hypothetical, they're like, oh, a percentage of marijuana tax or whatever. Like, I think that people are a little more amenable to, sales tax increases on specific classes of products that, maybe not everybody purchases, maybe they're overall like a luxury or recreation. Because obviously we don't want to like discourage spending it with businesses and all that stuff. But if we kind of make it a little more targeted, maybe it would be more do it. But I guess, yeah, I kind of want to see like math, like what that would look like.
Do you feel like there's a area that if you kind of think of that diverse portfolio, I mean, I think when we heard from Denver, that's really showed with them they have lots of different sources that come into that, which creates some consistency for them. And I think too, if you put this out to a vote or to ballot, whatever it is, to me, kind of bringing it together in terms of many different options. You're saying, hey, we're not putting this burden on just one thing. We're not putting it on, new developers. We're not putting it on just real estate transfers. We're saying we want a little contribution from all these different areas, and that's going to feed into this fund. Actually going to produce. To me, I feel like that's a good story. But you can, no one entity or one sector can say you're putting all this burden on me.
Right.
There another source that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think that like When I was looking through this, to me, it seems like the federal and state funding is all very on like our ability to get it, like how well our city navigates that process and helps developers navigate that process and everything. It's not necessarily like, it can be a source, but it's not really something that we can control.
You're right. Like CDBG home, those come federally, but they go through the county. The state also has funding. But oftentimes, developers will be able to access that funding easier when they see that the jurisdiction is perfect. So a lot of those funders want to see, hey, Inglewood's chipping in, okay, then we'll chip in. If they're like, hey, where's Inglewood at? Less likely to fund something.
So that has more to do with like how we're allocating the funds and implementing our plans after the fact than like if we have the affordable housing toolkit and infrastructure set up, this is more likely to increase. But it's not like kind of the starting point. It's kind of an after.
Do you all get any of those grant funds that filter down straight to Inglewood? CDBG?
CDBG, yeah, in fact, we just got our most recent award. We asked for $200,000, we're getting awarded $125,000. And it goes towards the energy efficiency program for existing homes so that they can upgrade the efficiency of their home.
Okay. So, and that does that get filtered through
to
the county?
Arapahoe County.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
So a potential complication with any adjustment to property tax is that is managed by the county directly.
Which is, I think, why Denver was able to do it, because they are a city and a county.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be an option.
Yeah, I think that we have like a reasonable 5-prong list of possibilities
The
here.
5 are property tax, real estate transfer tax, sales tax, fee in lieu, general fund. And in that, real estate transfer tax, fee in lieu, going to be somewhat cyclical. The property tax and the sales tax are more consistent. And then what we're kind of saying is there's some level of commitment that the general fund may come in to bridge that.
Resources are short.
I will just make a comment about that in the fact that the general fund comes mostly from sales tax. And so it is subject to those fluctuations in bad times as well.
So can I just confirm, recommendation for funding sources were graduated real estate transfer tax, these are all, of course, just possibilities, thinking. Property tax, sales tax, general fund, and then was it fee in lieu or was it the inclusionary zoning,
I think those are tied together.
They're tied together, okay.
Yeah, so the inclusionary policy is we want you to include affordable units.
Right, rather
But
than paying fee in lieu.
there's a fee in lieu option
Okay.
that then would bring funding
Okay,
in.
great, thank you.
And I don't really know the degree of specificity. I mean, we talked about this for all of our topics, that we're not really nailed down on how specific we want to go. So I don't know how much farther we want to go into like this amount, this, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think we needed somebody to do some analysis to help us understand. I think really what we're getting at it though is we want a diverse portfolio of funding sources that will help create more consistency. It will also help that communication of it, and I think maybe the buy-in of it, that it's not just one area that we're putting this burden on, but multiple sources.
A little bit from a lot of places, spreading the, impact around.
Gonna ask a question that just popped into my head. What do you think would be the minimum amount that you would want to generate in a year for the housing fund?
That's a great question. So I'll just reference Denver because Denver has a department. I believe that Denver provides subsidies somewhere in the range of $20,000 or $30,000 all the way up to $100,000 per unit, depending on the type of housing and the length of affordability requirement on this. So if worst case scenario was 100,000, maybe that's worst case, maybe that's best case, because you're talking about a product that is affordable in the very long term, maybe a very necessary product. But that's $1 million is 10 units. I don't know. I'd have to look back at the housing study to understand how many units are needed, but I think more the merrier. But also, it's in line with, you need to find the opportunities. So funding is great, but it's only good if there are opportunities out there to deploy that funding too. So it needs to be in tandem with these other pieces so that it can actually be deployed. But I think if it becomes known that it is committed, affordable housing is creating funding, then people are going to start looking at opportunities. I think right now, if I was a developer and there was Inglewood and then there was Denver right next door that's willing to give me funding, Denver next door, because that's where the funding. The other one that we, I guess, talked about it, linkage fees, so that there's the inclusionary, which is if you're building residential, you're including that. But the linkage fee is if you are permitting anything, not just residential, you're paying a linkage fee towards. There's a lot of trying to think the administrative burden of all these different things and how you can consolidate that, and which ones have a large administrative burden versus others. Because you have to administer that linkage fee, you have to administer the
Real estate transfer.
I don't even know who collects real estate transfer tax. I don't know how that would work.
I mean, the sale of the property has to be registered. Bonding thing, that's why I'm here as a renter. Like
So you
this stuff
record
is.
the document with the county.
So not with the city, okay.
Yeah, there's not the other area we haven't talked about is like rental licenses or short-term rental. I know that there isn't a large amount of short-term rentals in Inglewood, is that correct?
There's about 60 of them.
60. And Inglewood has decent like licensing requirements.
So
Does Inglewood require landlords to license?
not for 30 days and longer, so long-term leases, no.
No, the landlord will tell you that they're just going to pass that right off to their renter, which they might. But that could be again, that's kind of,
But like, you're saying it would specifically be for shorter term?
well, you could do longer term also. Anybody that is a landlord has to license, paying a fee and licensing their property, which then that fee can go towards housing.
And would that only be like new units being licensed?
I feel like Denver did this recently, but
It's everything in Denver
yeah, right, everything.
must be licensed.
And I don't know where that revenue goes to in Denver. I don't know if that went to affordable housing or not, but
I believe it's more safety related, so there you have to get your place inspected.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to make sure that all places are to a certain minimal living standard.
then they also probably have that data too, of how many units in their city are, landlord rental type units versus people living in them, because you don't necessarily, I mean, you can kind of sometimes infer that if, somebody's who owns the property, but their mailing address isn't, the same as their property address, but you're just inferring that at that point. You're not confirming that with it.
I would tend to believe that that cost would be passed directly on to the renters, as someone who's been renting for a decade. Especially with so many of the properties are managed by these like multi-billion-dollar, like they're all engaged in price fixing, they're being sued. I think the DOJ is like Gray Star and all those guys, they're the worst. And like, they already believe people drive for like whatever they can get. Like I could definitely be, especially if it's something nominal, like not that huge of a deal, I get it, but I also feel like the people in the renter market are the people that are being squeezed in a lot of ways, especially like if someone's renting short term, they're already paying astronomical monthly prices because they have an unstable life. Like they're already being gouged. And so like to put more pressure there feels a little like I have a little chafe at it,
Yeah, I get you on that for sure. I would say on the flip side to that though, at some point you can only charge so much for rent. And they're gonna push that limit probably regardless. But you have this person that owns a property that's not living in it, that's renting it. So should they be contributing towards affordable housing if they're not providing affordable housing? Or should they be if they're not, occupied? So yes, that is the answer that they will give you, that we're going to pass it off to the renter, but long
Yeah.
Renters can only so much. So if that rent is unaffordable, then they're gonna have to reduce that rent. This made me think that I'm just trying to organize this in some way of listing these options and trying to maybe make some notes about these different considerations. So like the considerations being, I guess, consistency or like predictability. You know, so on that one, we might say real estate transfer taxes. Well, those could fluctuate based on the market, the home sales market. So kind of, that's a column. Administrative burden, something like that, just talks about like, you know, does this cause is this a light burden? Is this, because I think sales tax, if you're saying the city already collects sales tax, that's how they, you know, there's an infrastructure for collecting sales tax, then all they would have to say is, okay, we're already collecting X amount of sales tax, a percentage of that, and let's say we increase that a little bit, a percentage of that is going in this direction. So you don't maybe have to recreate all the infrastructure to do that.
Right.
It's already there. But putting a real estate transfer tax, you might need X amount of resources or a new position or something like that. So what did I say? I said consistency. Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, creative considerations were like, for infrastructure needed.
The actual magnitude of it, like how much we think it could produce.
Right.
Other considerations?
I guess well, I guess that like falls under administrative considerations or like I was thinking about how the property taxes are not managed directly by, you know, that probably falls in that category. Yeah, I mean, I think we have like the likely consistency, the likely magnitude, and then all the other possible considerations, like possible complications or whatever, complicating factors, challenges, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of things filled out on that chart because we currently know them.
I like goofy little solution. I was like scrolling through recently sold homes on Inglewood on Zillow. It was just like, well, like how much would this be for a week or whatever? You know, like it's not a huge amount for any one sale, but there's a good amount of things changing hands.
Yeah, so you're saying if there's a $500,000 sale and it's a 0.5%, $2,500.
And that's if it's a 0.5%, like Colorado State's is 0.1%. So I think we could, you know, we could go higher than that. We could, but yeah, like. I'm a little curious as well, like what other, if there are, I know there are other Colorado cities that have such a thing. So I'm a little curious to see what their rates are. Because I think that the half might be a little high for like your median property or whatever. But once
Yeah,
you
with
go
that
up to like $1
gradu-
million,
Yeah, with that
like,
graduated.
does it matter? Should those people pay more? Yeah. You know, like what's another 10K?
Maybe,
You're buying $1 million home. I don't know. I haven't tried it.
personally, there's more, $1 million home is more and more common these days. One of those columns could be, is it kind of like within the control of the city? Like, so
You break out that consideration. of
sales
the-
tax
yeah.
is, a fee in lieu is, the general fund is, linkage fee is, the property tax is probably not. The real estate transfer tax, I just don't know how it works, so somebody would need to answer that question for us.
Yeah, I think that it would be, because I think Vail has one. I saw another couple other cities popped up when I was. But how they administrate it, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you would imagine that the city would be able to get all property sale records from the county. But it seems very like after the fact.
Would need to be
Part of the
included,
process, yeah.
So then what are we how are we presenting on Thursday?
Correct me if I'm again wrong, John, but John's going to take the consensus of what the two of you reached on for recommendations, and the facilitator will put that into a PowerPoint, and so we'll get that out to you before Thursday.
It'll probably be very high level,
High
very
level.
short. And so what you'll probably need to do is, when it comes to your turn, to just elaborate as you are doing giving a little more, putting a little more meat on the bones for your audience.
So that what I'm hearing, I guess the three things that we want to highlight is we want a diverse funding portfolio. We've identified these different options for that, and then we want to organize those in a way that helps understand the different factors: consistency, magnitude, the administrative need, city has the ability to implement it, and then any other considerations.
And I mean, I think we could like organize it, we could provide it, that chart, like if we have it.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah.
We'd be guessing at a lot of the things, or we could just do the chart and say, we need the city to fill this in, basically, because a lot of this is information that we don't have. We don't know the magnitude, we don't really know what the administrative need. Yeah.
And I guess I'm just
I guess the
wondering if we should organize like our specific questions, like what we do need to know. Like does the city have numbers on the property sold?
Yeah.
Like if we can identify like specific questions to ask.
I just thought of another one of how do we, the consideration would be, how does that get put in place? So is that, if you're going to do real estate transfer tax, does that have to be a ballot measure? Is that something the city can just do? Sales tax, a ballot measure, what is that? General fund, is that just the city? That city council determining that? Like where is that decision
Yeah,
of doing that made?
yeah,
Because that would be helpful.
I agree.
Yes, just I'll say that I believe that Tabor will require anything to be voted by the citizens.
Any tax,
A tax.
a fee, linkage fee or a fee in lieu is not a tax.
Those, yes, that might be able to be council.
Or if it was a documentary. Downtown Colorado.
City. That's for the city attorneys to figure out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because that might help understand, hey, if you wanted to put a ballot measure, you're packaging these three different ones together, because those are the three that have to go to they might be part of a larger story, but it's being packaged together as.
I mean, I think that we have like a high level, like, I probably want to think about more like specifics to the questions we would like answers to, or that we think would inform that, a more specific recommendation, but like without more information, like this is the list of possibilities that we think we could spread this burden across in a small way.
I think that's the key thing. It needs to be a portfolio. It's not one
Right.
thing is you're putting all your eggs in one basket. If that one thing doesn't work, it happens.
Right.
So it's saying there needs to be a portfolio of sources that create.
And maybe provide some more context that like we need the portfolio of sources from these types of options to hopefully get Prop 123 money and get more block grant money and more leveraging this, investment to expand, and have greater access to more funds after the fact. But at the outset, we need these dedicated funding sources.
And then I think it comes to the priorities of the city and what kind of housing invest in, about how they're investing that funding. Did you want to include rental license fees in there? Get that one.
I'm open to it. Like all of these options I think are tweakable enough that maybe the impact is overall to any one person or any one entity is not, not crazy and not likely to, jack up rent to an inordinate degree or whatever. Like I think I want to do some math, see a little bit of math on like, because it's licensing, that's something I wasn't totally clear on though, is licensing something that happens like annually or something that every time they rent it out, they
have to renew, it's initial and then they have to renew. I'm not sure on the.
It's a yearly thing, Becky.
It's yearly, okay. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm open to it as, like, obviously, my natural pause, or like concern about it is there, but I don't think that it's necessarily a deal breaker or something that, cause.
I think it touches on a large sector. I mean, I get the housing
Mhm. I don't see any reason not to include it as a possible
Especially if you
recommendation.
outline those considerations. But I do outline those
The
because
possible
also,
consideration.
it might be the one that there's some that are not, that don't need to go out to a vote, that maybe done internally with city
Yeah,
council
that one
approval.
has
So
that
just kind of
advantage, so I agree, yeah.
Yeah, trying to understand
Mhm.
those different levels of implementation and approvals.
Agenda items.
Well, part 5 says draft recommendations. How can these ideas be formed into concrete recommendations? I feel that you've done a pretty good job of that. I think that was pretty detailed. And so I think we covered that. So I would think we just move on to part 6, next steps. I think you've probably already done this. Decide who presents to the larger group and how it will be presented. So Sophie will be presenting. I will take this and try to boil it down to its essence. And then you'll be up on somebody's PowerPoint, I guess, and then you'll just talk to each of the bullet points. That's probably what I'll do, is bullet points, but the person that I'm going to give this off to may do something a little different with that. But yeah, then you'll just go through your list there and just put a little bit more meat on the bones. Schedule next meeting. I don't think you guys need another meeting. So I think you did a great job. That, unless there's anything else, we can go home.
I did want to ask, so if we do, say, fill out a chart that's got like consistent, whatever, and we can put question marks. If we do just set that up, could we like send that to either be included in the PowerPoint or print it out so that people could see it?
Certainly. John, what would you recommend?
If you'd like to put that together and get it to me tomorrow morning, because I need to do this tomorrow morning and get this to them by noon, I guess. Isn't that right?
Yeah, to me. Yeah.
Yes. So if one of you has some possibilities and some time that you could do that, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll have to just do it my own way. And because I did hear that, the chart thing, but it might be more, if you do it, it'll be, obviously I could get something kind of incorrect or wrong in how I was hearing it. So if you can do it, that'd be really great.
I don't think it necessarily has to be done. It's just something that I was like.
I think it helps to organize all the thoughts that we had. This is what we want to fill out because this will inform probably the next steps, because I think it's hard to provide recommendations when we don't have some of this information in terms of how we implement it, the magnitude it would create, all that kind of stuff. If we had that filled out, I could easily say, hey, if you package these 3 things together, do a ballot measure, maybe, at least, I think that's where it gets challenging. So we think these are good ideas, but we need information to really turn them into recommendations. And the chart would help us do that. Specifically saying, this is where we want to find out more information about these different things.
Draft of it. See what you think.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
There you
you.
go.
Efficient.
May I ask